Geography now, United Kingdom, UK, one of my favorite countries in the world. I could even imagine myself living there one day. Let's take a look at the UK. Let's look at their teeth. Let's go.
Hey, Jugger peeps. As you know, I'm American, and I just got my Anglophone family reunion invite, so I guess I have to show up to be polite and all.
He's getting older, man. People are getting older, like me. I love Britain, man. Britain is beautiful. It's also cool how he got so rich now with his YouTube channel. Every time he talks about a country, he just goes there IRL because he can afford it. And that's cool, though.
Hey, everyone. I'm your host, Barbs. Get your Geography Now merch, like this Geography Now t-shirt at geographynow.com. Not selling out if it's your brand. Well, here I am in the big crumpet, the big uck. The land of kings, queens, and in-betweens.
He doesn't look very excited, does he?
A quarter of the world's population and land area was under their rule. Of course, such a story came with lots of complicated chapters, and when it comes to complication, usually it's best to have a person from the
most complicated chapter about them is their food.
So, the UK today is very different from what it used to be. And no, we're not referencing how the island used to be connected to the rest of continental Europe via Doggerland.
And no, we're not referencing the Mesolithic Arensbergian hunter-gatherers.
Or the Neolithic agriculturalists and enormous stone transporting and solstice measuring peoples.
No, we're referencing a time later on when the entire island was just a mess of clans, chiefdoms, opposing monarchs, and outside monarchs trying to come in and out-monarch the said monarchs.
It wasn't until much later that the country actually completed unifying everything on the island of Great Britain, plus Northern Ireland. Don't forget the overseas territories and Crown dependencies. You could probably forget the Crown dependencies.
Yeah, because there's like a whole other thing going on.
Yeah, what even is that?
And you guys have a town called T.O.
Yeah. There's a place near here called Trotter's Bottom.
I went to Bitfield. Oh, and of course you can't forget
Very good, very good, very good. Actually, speaking of places in Britain, did you know that we've got some of the weirdest and hardest to pronounce places in the world?
Okay. Leicester, Fromey, Ruislip, Chiswick, Landfall.
Llanelli.
Llanelli. Oh yeah, that's Welsh, isn't it?
It is Welsh.
Oh,
so those Welsh as you
those
can get.
Welshies, you can't trust them.
Well, in any case, let's look at the map, shall we?
I don't also know anyone who's Welsh. I know Gareth Bale. That's it. Who else is Welsh?
The main chunk of what makes up the UK is Great Britain, located off the northwestern coast of the continental mainland of Europe, north of France, separated by the English Channel, and east of Ireland, separated by the Irish Sea to the east, as well as the North Sea, and to the north, the North Atlantic. The island of Great Britain is made up of three constituent countries: England, which holds about 84% of the country's population, Scotland, which holds about 8%, and Wales at about 1.5%. From there, they also administer Northern Ireland, which doesn't exactly have an official political title. Some say it's a constituent country, some say it's a region or province, but to this day it lies across the Irish.
I think it's part of good old Ireland. Come out, your black and tans.
On the northern section of the island of Ireland, making it their largest land border with any country. Outside of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, though, the UK has 3 crown dependencies and 14 overseas territories, 12 of which are small islands in the Caribbean, Atlantic, Indian, and Pacific Oceans.
They still have the little empire, huh? They still have the little empire, bro.
2 of them, Gibraltar and the sovereign bases of Akrotiri and Dhekelia, are small areas attached to the larger...
Wait, they own something in Cyprus? In Gibraltar, they have the rock in the south.
Shared land masses of Spain and Cyprus. Keep in mind the crown dependencies of the Isle of Man, Guernsey, and Jersey are technically not considered part of the UK, but are still subject to the UK's defense and international rep.
That's so awkward. I know that the Isle of Man has one of the best banks in the world. People like you and me, people that are not that rich, we don't know this, but the Isle of Man, like most rich people, they have a bank on the Isle of Man, and they have crazy motorcycle race on the Isle of Man. And they have a crazy bank there.
And finally, the British Antarctic Territory and its main base at Rothera is a section of Antarctica that does not have any actual sovereign status, as all countries are subject to the Antarctic Treaty, which states no one can colonize the continent. The entire domain that falls under the UK's sovereignty spans across 9 time zones. Anyway, back to the main island. This is where things take a twist. First off, keep in mind, each of the constituent countries of Scotland and Wales, as well as whatever you want to label Northern Ireland, has their own parliament system with a head called a First Minister, whereas England does not have its own separate parliament, as they just use the same country capital as Westminster Palace building.
London is so fucking big, man. Holy shit.
Constituent officials, since it's pretty much always been the spot used for them anyway, and they see...
Dude, look at this editing. His editing improved so much. I remember watching him a year ago. This is very different.
No need to complicate things further. On paper, England has 48 counties, Scotland has 32 council areas, Wales has 22 principal areas, and Northern Ireland has 6 counties. However, keep in mind, many of these are disputed. People don't pay attention to them, and many might just refer to their traditional areas, which is another topic. In any any case, the capital and largest city
Ireland has, like, no cities.
in
Look at that,
Western
it's all
Europe
green.
is London. After that, it's Manchester at number 2 and Birmingham at number 3. Also, keep in mind the City of London, or the City of London Corporation, has its own separate government, which is independent from the rest of the country. This means that the Lord Mayor of London is technically the highest-ranking official in the UK after the monarch, even though the City of London in itself is just one small part of Greater London.
Why is everything so
has
fucking
4
weird?
of the top 10 busiest airports in the country: Heathrow, Gatwick, Stansted, and Luton. Whereas
The
outside of the
4
London area,
airports.
Manchester International comes in at number 3 and Edinburgh International
Edinburgh.
at number 6.
Edinburgh is so small. I was there last year. Edinburgh is like really a small airport.
Just on the east side of England lies the port of Felixstowe, the largest and busiest shipping port of the country. The country has a very extensive...
I love this. It's so crazy when you go to Google Earth and you zoom in on any country in the world. It's just fields. The whole world is just fields. Wherever you go, fields, fields, fields. You don't realize how much fields there's in the
road
world.
and rail network, and otherwise, London's Waterloo and Victoria are the largest train stations, and the completion of the Channel in 1994 officially connected the UK to the rest of mainland
That
Europe.
was a very, very great achievement for the EU and the human race,
via
man.
France.
Except literally no one calls it the Channel ever.
I call it the channel.
Eurotunnel.
You don't. It's the
Eurotunnel.
Channel Tunnel, or the
That's-
Eurostar, or Le Shuttle, or anything but Channel. No one says Channel.
You know, one
Calling
says
it
channel.
channel.
Yeah.
So as you can see, when it comes to the administrative divisions, the UK is quite possibly the biggest nightmare in the world.
And keep in mind, we didn't even mention all the other confusing administrative levels like combined authority areas, metropolitan counties, lieutenancy areas, or lieutenancy areas, depending how you want to pronounce it, parishes, wards. It's a lot.
Yeah. To help a little bit more on understanding on how all these things actively work, we could mention the 650 constituency system, in which 650 small sections of the country get represented in the parliament with a representative.
It's so complicated. The way we do things in this country is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And if it is massively broke, still don't fix it.
Anyway, off of that note, the UK has a bicameral legislature consisting of the House of Commons and the House of Lords.
So the House of Commons is the one that you see on the telly, and the House of Lords is the big room next door where they wear robes, and it's weird.
And the Whigs too, right?
Wigs sometimes,
And
yeah.
they're appointed.
So there are 4 ways you can get into the House of Lords. One of them is by giving lots of money to the governing party, and then they sort of, as a favour, make you a lord. But that's not officially how it works, so that's not what I said. The other way is if you're an expert in something like the law or the arts or beer. The other way is if you happen to be born with a dad who's already a hereditary peer.
So it can be hereditary.
It can be hereditary. And you're allowed to become a member of the House of Lords as long as you don't have any older brothers. Isn't it insane? Some British place names, just from looking at the name, you can tell which part of the country it's in. So, for example, if it's got a Celtic name, which means it has words like Tre, Loch, Bryn, and Aber, that means you're likely to find it in Wales. Or if it's got a Viking suffix, such as Thwaite, Thorpe, Kirk, or Bee, that means you're likely to find it in the north. And then there are the Anglo-Saxon place names, such as Ing, Ham, Bury, Ford, Port, and so on and so on.
So you can actually tell which group of people influenced which area based off of the suffix of the name of the place.
Sort of, although that was probably more true hundreds of years ago, and now these days all the names get mixed up and they come up with new place names all the time.
Gotta have that Trotter's bottom. So all of that brings us to the obvious topic. The UK is a constitutional
There's UK boomers that call for the closing of that tunnel. That's not true. That's not true. That's not true.
monarchy.
Technically, the king is in charge.
Well, that's
it's
even
his
happening,
country
man.
and it's his laws. But how this practically works is he's just a ceremonial figurehead, and it's actually the government and the prime minister that make all the actual decisions.
But he could also step in if he wanted to.
Yeah, in theory, he could step in and say, I don't like this law, but he knows full
But they know if they will step in, they will get fucked over.
well if he tried that, there'd be an instant revolution and we'd set Buckingham Palace on fire.
You got another
Yeah.
Oliver Cromwell.
I always feel like the monarchs in Britain, they really understand they have to shut the fuck up. They have to be quiet so nobody fucking takes their heads.
Long story short, it wasn't always this way. In fact, the UK's history is more like the combined histories of the 3 constituent countries of Scotland, England, and Wales, plus a little bit of Northern Ireland, but that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Ulster,
Like, even though the UK is a country, like the bits that make it up are also called countries.
Yeah, there's no simple way to condense this whole history.
Let's try anyway.
Ancient beaker culture.
Celts arrived and split into the Britons.
Okay, step by step. I want to actually care about
to-
this. Ancient beaker culture. Okay. I actually read a history book once where it's like a crazy hardcore history book that's really about no bullshit. And there's this period when humans started to make these things. How do you call them? And that was massive for the human race because for the first time they could actually save up food and like grain and stuff. Pottery. Celts, Britons, and Gaelic Picts. So yeah, but the humans come from Africa, they go to Europe, and then there was probably a land bridge and they go over to these islands, right? But there's 3 different ones. Okay, what?
Celts arrived and split into the Britons, Gaels and Picts.
Romans failed to conquer the Picts. They build Hadrian's Wall.
Romans leave, in come the Germanic tribes.
Scotland splits into 4 kingdoms.
Egbert becomes the first Saxon king.
And then the Anglo-Saxons split into 7 kingdoms.
I know this from Vikings. This is Vikings. Right?
Anglo-Saxon, by the way, is where the name England comes from. Cornwall falls to Wessex, but keeps its language and culture.
Meanwhile, Wales was made up of many kingdoms, but the largest are Gwynedd, Powys, and Dyfed.
Vikings
I know that from Crusader Kings.
come in, raid much of the Hebrides Island and Isle of Man.
Scots and Pigs.
I always am a big romanticizer and fantasizer, and I always would like to, as an observer, like an admin, observe historic events. Can you imagine what it must have been like when the fucking Great Heathen Army lands in the UK, man?
Joined to create the Kingdom of Alba.
Danish Vikings come in and create the Danelaw. This is also how lots of Danish words crept their way back into modern English, such as leg, window,
the Vikings
and
actually
yes,
took
even
over a
ransack,
little
which
bit,
is
huh?
exactly what the Danes were doing.
Anglo-Saxon Aethelstan fights against them and becomes the first king of England. Meanwhile, in the
Athelstan was the first king of England, but he was also the first king that said, hey, let's translate the Bible into English, not just Latin, to spread the word more to the peasants.
11th century, Griffith ap Llewellyn becomes the only king that ruled over all of Wales, but then it is quickly killed by one of his own people.
William of Normandy takes over England, and thus begins the Norman dynasty.
Angevin Empire via the House of Plantagenets begins.
Crusades! Oops.
There's this movie on Netflix with Timothy Chalamet, the king, where that little boy king wins the Battle of Agincourt, and all of a sudden he owns North France, and he's like, what the fuck? It's a cool movie, man. You guys gotta watch that.
Richard Lionheart plays a huge role in this.
King John is terrible, and then his barons.
Magna Carta, I remember in law school, for human rights or a constitution, the Magna Carta. But the first law code ever was some old thing in Babylon from Hammurabi. Hammurabi had like this big stone obelisk, and there was laws on it. That was the first law ever seen in the human race. But Magna Carta is the first constitutional human right thingy. TommyKay Law School.
And the Magna Carta.
1284, Edward I conquers Wales and integrates it into England, but they maintain their language and culture.
Alexander III of Scotland dies, and 14 rivals claim succession to the throne.
14th century, Charles
Dung dang. Charles of France.
IV of France dies with no heir, so Edward III was eligible through his mum, but the French were like, hell no, and elected Prince Philip of Valois, and hence began the 100 Years' War.
Yes, this is when the Joan of Arc thing happened.
Edward III dies, many claimants to the throne rise up, and thus begins the War of the Roses.
16th century,
I know this guy had a lot of wives, and every time he didn't like them, he killed them or some shit.
Tudor dynasty begins,
can't do
and
it
thus
anymore.
all that crazy Henry VIII stuff goes down.
Okay.
You know the history, divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived.
It's cute because it rhymes.
Meanwhile, in 1585, the British take their first stab at colonizing what is now Virginia in the USA, which eventually evolved into the 13 colonies.
Meanwhile, the East India Company begins shortly after.
I heard the East India Company is still nowadays the most valuable company in human history. OG Lizzie.
But the first rule leads to the Mary Queen of Scots thing and the Spanish Armada.
17th century, Elizabeth I dies. Closest relative is James VI of Scotland, and he becomes ruler, hence joining Scotland and England for the first time, becoming the first monarch to
Oh, he played CK3 Intrigue style. There wasn't even a war to integrate Scotland. Clever.
rule over the entire island of Great Britain.
Conspirators try to assassinate him and blow up
The Guy Fawkes thing. Remember the 5th of November? He tried to blow up the Parliament or some shit. He looked exactly like the guy from The Matrix.
Parliament, aka the Guy Fawkes thing.
Charles I and Parliament have tensions, and thus begins the English Civil War.
Oliver Cromwell becomes Lord Protector after dissolving the monarchy. But after he dies, the monarchy is restored with Charles II.
There was no monarchy for a while?
You guys really went back to that monarchy thing fast. In the 17th century, Scotland unsuccessfully attempts colonies in Panama and Nova Scotia, and it has an economic crisis.
Scotland couldn't colonize. I don't know why that's funny.
1707, the union between Scotland and England is finalised.
Queen Anne dies, ending the House of Stuart, and in comes the House of Hanover.
I'm gonna
Great
shut
Britain
them up.
taxes colonies to try and make up for the debt.
Colonies aren't happy, which leads to the War
Thank you,
of
dude.
Independence for America.
The Industrial Revolution.
Let's just
I'm reading a book about that right now. Yeah, I'm right now. I'm reading a book. I read like one chapter a week to fix my ADHD. I'm reading a book right now about the Industrial Revolution of the UK, and it's so deep and it's so interesting. Why do you think the Industrial Revolution started in England? Why not in Germany or France? Why didn't the Roman Empire had an Industrial Revolution? Why didn't they make machines? I know the answer because I read a book.
pass over
I'll
that
tell you
whole
later.
chapter. Captain James Cook swings by Australia, New Zealand, and hey, let's establish some more penal colonies.
Napoleon.
It's not the resources. The resource is the second part, but the first part is something else.
East India Company is met with revolt and leads to a full takeover of India in 1858.
You're all wrong, guys. You need to read books, man. Obviously, a lot of the things you guys are saying came together. But the number one thing, and here we go. The thing is, the Industrial Revolution started in England because, for the first time in history, in North America and Europe, thank you, Bockwin. No, coal was after that. The first spinning machines weren't run on coal. It's not coal. The most important thing, England was the first nation in the world where the workers got fair pay. The UK had a certain system. I would have to get the book again. Whereas the workers in England at that time made much, much more money than workers in other European countries. And innovation comes from workers that were not so poor. I need to read the book again. I'm totally doing this wrong right now. If you look at inventions in the 1700s, 1800s, the inventions were often mostly made, not by scientists, especially industrial ones, but by workers. The first 5 inventions of the spinning machine in Britain were made by workers, not engineers or anything, because these workers had time to think. They actually, I remember now, the book was talking about this. The book was, she was doing a study, and she looked at a worker. When was this, 1760 or something? She looked at the average English worker and then the average Prussian worker, French worker. And the average English worker at that time, for certain reasons, because they had a big empire, had far more food on the table. They had more goods, they had tobacco, opium, they had bread, etc. And because they didn't have to care about survival so much more anymore, they actually had time to invent and improve themselves. They weren't fighting for survival so much anymore. And that's why some random ass mining dude made the first spinning thing, and then later this guy made the spinning jenny. And the book is suggesting, she can explain it much better. I could get the book right now, okay. She explained it better. And with that, she wants to explain, she wants to make a bridge to nowadays that if the workers are well paid and the working class is doing well, your country goes into a phase of prosperity, which takes a while. They still had problems for a while, but she wants to argue that it really worked really well for a country when the workers weren't so fucking poor all the time and shit. The high living standards led to the invention of better machines and industrialization, and then came in that they had the fuel, the coal, whereas Prussia didn't, when the UK was already gathering coal, Prussia didn't even find their coal reserves yet. I remember that in the book.
1921, land grabs from the crumbling German and Ottoman empires resulted in the height of the territorial rule for the UK.
1922, Ireland breaks away.
World War II, the whole Winston Churchill and the Battle of the Blitz stuff happened.
Afterwards, one by one, the former territories got their independence.
The Commonwealth of Nations is established.
Why though? I always wonder why. Why did UK give everyone independence? Why? Too expensive to keep them. Oh, okay. They were broke.
NATO,
okay.
Paramilitary violence in Northern Ireland.
Sorry about that. Joins the European Economic Community, which was
Tina ladies behind me. Literally, she's behind the door.
Monetarism policies are enacted under the Margaret Thatcher years.
Falkland Islands War.
2008 global financial crisis followed by a Scottish referendum ending in remaining part of the UK.
Very close, man. Very close.
2016, the UK votes at nearly 52% to leave the EU.
52%, man.
Queen Elizabeth II, longest reigning British monarch, passes away. Her son, King Charles III, is coronated.
Crowned.
So there you go, an oversimplified outline of the thousands of years of like 70, 20, 10% British, Scottish, Welsh history, all jammed into a cheesy YouTube skit with minimal...
This isn't true. The UK had higher wages. Yeah, also, I said the workers did better. You're right. They had higher wages. It forced them to cut down on manpower and implementing machines. Yeah, you're actually explaining it better than me. The UK had... Yeah, man, he explains it so much better. Victio, the one guy in chat with an IQ, I did it a bit wrong. I forgot the book. He's explained correctly. The reason the industrialization started in the UK is that the UK had the highest wages at that time in the world. So the economical system of the UK, yeah, thank you, you're totally right, man, realized we cannot afford these workers. This is too expensive. So people like these mining people were like, bro, we have to make machines here. These people are fucking too expensive. And that's how they started making the spinning machines. Yeah, you're totally correct. Yeah. Yep. It's a tactic to beat ADHD. I want to read one chapter a day. And this is a book I like. It's called The End of Capitalism. She talks about the Industrial Revolution, where she wanted to show that, for example, she wanted to show an example that if you actually pay your workers good money, it's really good for your economy.
You'll hear most often from people who love the royal family is how good it is for tourism. Despite the fact that
written by
if
Hassan.
we got rid of the monarchy, we could...
It's kind of sad, and she talked about it in an interview on a podcast. I heard that last year. That everybody calls her communist, but nobody even knows what the fuck she's talking about. Like, just because the book is read and says the end of capitalism doesn't mean she's a communist. She scientifically talks about how capitalism will probably end one day.
Buckingham Palace into a really expensive museum.
Which shows how deep the Red Scare has been
indoctrinated.
indoctrinated.
A monarch to like fantasize about the fairy tale monarch, princess, king, queen stuff, you know? It's like...
But then maybe King Charles could retrain and get a different job as a chartered quantity
Yeah,
surveyor.
but it takes away the whole fantasy aspect. We think of monarchs as like magical creatures.
That's the problem!
Despite an increasing number
We're not in post... That's so wrong. We're in the post-capitalist era. No, post... You know what post means? It means after. We're not after capitalism. We're in late game capitalism. We're in the end capitalism. We're not in post capitalism.
Republicans, which in this country means people vying for a republic against the idea of...
And yet, yeah, capitalism will end one day. The thing is, though, scientifically speaking, people with a brain, unlike you and me, she talks about how it might end. And it's gonna end. It's gonna end. It's a good book. I didn't read it in weeks, man. I have to read it again.
Most Brits are okay with the royal family. It has a unique role as both representing longevity and tradition and tabloids. In our own country, we like to go to the seaside. right. Places like Southend.
The longest pleasure pier in the world. And speaking of which, we got a guy who kind of saved a lot of people over there. And he's going to do the famous places segment. Come on in, Mr. Tommy Boy.
So, other than Southend Pier, the longest pleasure pier in the world, which I did save by peeing on when it was on fire. True story. Other places you need to visit are London, obviously, St. Paul's Cathedral,
Yeah, London is fucking amazing. I've been there in the vlog. London is so beautiful, man.
Palace,
London is beautiful.
London Eye, Tower of London, Tower Bridge, the House of Parliament,
I was
Big
all
Ben,
there. I was
red
there.
telephone boxes, of which many have now been repurposed. Police boxes for you Doctor Who fans. Stonehenge, Seahenge, which isn't even a henge. Silbury Hill, the Royal Ascot and its many funny hats. Bath with its Roman baths. The Jurassic Coast, including Durdle Door.
That's where Lisa wants to go
and
really
Fossil
badly.
Beach in Lyme Regis.
Wow.
Windsor Castle, the Shambles in
Wow, the Shamble. That looks so cool. Where's that?
York, the Peak and Lake Districts, the Eden Project, Carnarvon, Conway, Caerphilly, Cardiff, Snowdonia with Mount Snowdon, which you can actually go up on a train. Penryn's Lake Quarry, the underground trampoline park in Clegwyd, Dobby the House Elf's grave.
No way, that exists.
Where people keep leaving their socks. So next, we're going to go up to Scotland. First,
Edinburgh is so my favorite city. That's King's Road. They're up King's Road. They're very close to the castle here. There's always a Doodlesack player here. No. I love Edinburgh. You all have to go to Edinburgh. What a fucking great city.
you have to start with Edinburgh.
Yeah.
It's Royal Mile.
Yeah, the Royal Mile. I always call it the King's Mile.
Castles.
Dude, please say offer seat.
St Kilda, Orkney and Lewis for Neolithic stone.
Dude, this is so my world. As a ginger, I feel so home in this. You know, when they talk about Brazil and shit, I'm like, I don't want to go there. Fuck that. I'm going to burn. This shit is my world. I love this shit.
Circles, Shetland for ponies, Isle of Skye, Loch Ness. What I personally think is the coolest thing in the whole of the UK, Fingal's Cave. It's on the island of Staffa. You can walk in the cave, you can walk on it, on top. There are puffins everywhere, and when you're on the boat, there are whales and dolphins swimming next to you. We jump across to Northern Ireland, which you can actually see from Scotland.
You didn't say offer seat. I'm
We
sad.
start off with the Giant's Causeway, Carrick-a-Reed Rope Bridge, the Titanic Museum, the Dark Hedges, and now for the overseas territories, the Gibraltar Rock with its Barbary apes, Jersey, where you can see some cows, Guernsey, Guernsey and Alderney, some of the most fortified islands on Earth, and go to the Isle of Man to see the TT motorbike races. I mean, overall, I'm so glad I got to do this trip. Give me some love. Honestly.
That must have been so fun, man. But yeah, we're big fans of England, and all that shit you just said, I want to see that.
That's so much fun.
I will come to Ireland,
process, and
100%.
we didn't even scratch the surface.
Also, the cool thing about England is you speak the language, right? I'm a German, and I can go there and speak their language. That's so fucking cool. I go to France, I don't speak French, right? It sucks I don't have the euro. That's a bit sad, but...
Alas, we must move on to the next segment of this ever-complicated nation, the physical geography.
The highest peak is like really small, like 800 meters or something.
The landscape of the UK, most people, they just kind of like default in their minds to the typical hilly green pastures or the Scottish Highlands and just like a lot of rain.
And yes,
when I was in Edinburgh, we had a tour with a guide through Edinburgh and about Scotland. And he explained something to us. Did you know that Scottish culture, the bagpipes, the kilts, is stolen from the hill tribes? Back in the day, there was the rural Scottish that had villages and stuff, and there was the tribes in the hills. And the hill tribes were actually the ones that had skirts and did all these village people were taking the culture of the Highlands for themselves, acting like it's our culture, it's our culture. Interesting. Interesting.
That does apply to much of the country, but if we're going to be technical, you
Back
can
in the
also
Middle Earth
include
days.
coconut tree-lined atolls, frozen glaciers, erupting volcanoes, beaches with penguins, and much more.
Let's look at the map to explain, shall we?
First of all, the main part of the country, Great Britain and Northern Ireland, are located in the western parts of the Eurasian plate, with many, many fault lines feeding through.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of
Great Britain. The most general way to
here,
divide
nice.
the island is with the T's X line, which is an imaginary diagonal boundary that separates the lowlands with the highland regions in the north and west.
What's the Midlands? I remember when I was in Britain, there was a tour, and he would always say, "Where are you from?" "Oh, we're from the Midlands." "Oh, okay." And I was like, "What does that mean?" I felt like they're from the Midlands or some shit.
This geological formation is also what contributes to some hot spring areas along the line, most notably in areas
He said
like
Midlands.
Derbyshire
I remember.
and
He didn't
the
say
city of
Midlands. He
Bath.
said
The most
Midlands.
notable fault line, though, would be the
remember
Great
that.
Glen Fault up in Scotland, which splits like a scar through the Scottish Highlands, which are the highest part of the country, and also hold the tallest peak of the country, Ben Nevis.
Which is
This
not
fault
high.
line also creates
He
long,
doesn't
deep
say how high?
rift lakes like the famous Loch Ness, which is the most voluminous lake in the entire country, holding nearly double.
By the way, the Loch Ness Monster, back in the day, it was connected via this thing, and we think a whale swam up here and showed his penis. And the penis This was probably what they thought the Loch Ness monster.
The amount of water in all the lakes of England and Wales combined.
story,
If you want to find the lake with the largest surface area, though, you'd have to go to Northern Ireland and visit Loch Ness. If you want to find the longest river, though, many people might mistakenly say it's the Thames, which, although it is an important river that goes through London, it is not the longest. The longest is actually the Severn River that starts in the Highlands of Wales and meanders through England and empties into Bristol Bay. In any case, if we want to be completely well-rounded on the sovereign domain of the UK, you could include everything from the tropical beaches of Caribbean island territories like Anguilla
Dude, that's the screen
Montserrat
wallpaper
Island
from
actually
Windows
had an
XP.
enormous volcanic eruption in 1995 that destroyed the entire southern part of the island, including the former capital Plymouth. The South Georgia and South Sandwich Islands are the coldest parts of the UK's territories, with permanent glaciers and protected wildlife breeding grounds. The South Sandwich Islands are pretty volcanically active too, especially Mount Belinda,
Volcanoes
Mount
are
Curry,
so
and
scary.
Mount Michael, which create an eerie sight of fire and ice when they erupt. In any
that's
case,
weird.
these are all just examples that show the range of what you can naturally find in areas that fall within the sovereignty of the UK.
Now, despite being a nation smaller in area than the country of Guinea in West Africa, the UK today stands with the 6th largest national economy by nominal GDP in the world.
We used to be number 5. Many factors attributed to
took
this
over?
prosperity growth, such as
Something
the
Asian, I
Industrial
guess.
Revolution, or the fact that we were an island isolated, but not too isolated from continental Europe, with access to multiple naval trade routes that we dominated and protected.
Now,
India
this
took
is where
over.
I usually take my triple shot espresso
How the tables have turned, huh? How the tables have turned, Mr. Churchill. Fucking hell.
break, and Noel fills in for the rest of the segment. However, since I'm here in the UK, I guess I'll have to switch things up and do an English breakfast tea break.
Coming right up. Here you go, take this.
Oh wow, this is a thing that you guys do.
They have actually very good tea. man.
You're getting two.
That,
You know, we Germans are disgusting. I can't explain. We have these little tea bags and there's no love in it. And then you go to Britain and they have like a, I can't explain. They have like this thing and they put the herbs in it and they close the thing and they put the thing in the water and then it's like high level tea, man.
not much. Okay.
They like really give a shit.
It's not bad,
A
it's good,
strainer,
but like,
it's
is there any
called.
way to make it stronger?
It's as strong as it needs to be.
I thought it's about England, not Ireland.
He's f***ing drinking it. Can I try some? I don't hate it as much as I should.
You don't hate it as much as... Yes! America and the UK join forces!
Last time they did that, it didn't go well for my grandpa.
All
What?
right, the UK. Let's get to it, okay? So historically, many of the parts that made up the UK followed some brutal and ineffective economic practices. For example, people were expected to stay and work in their home parishes even if there was no work. Those that wandered off to find work elsewhere were deemed vagabonds and if caught were subject to things like whippings or being put into stocks. Yeah, that didn't work out so well. Eventually though, over time, many parts of what are now England fell into a system of mercantilism, or a policy that attempted to maximize tariff exports with quotas while minimizing imports. That kind of worked, but
This is
as
all
you
very
know,
intelligent
most
content.
of the
I have to
world
listen.
hates tariffs, so eventually they had to drop that system in 1840. The Industrial Revolution was without a doubt a game changer that launched the UK into global dominance. Things like the sewing machine, steam-powered engines, and turbines, the telegraphs revolutionized the entire manufacturing system, where now things were made by machine instead of by hand. Every region had their distinct industry and resources. Newcastle focused on shipbuilding, from Manchester, cotton, Middlesbrough, iron and steel, Scotland, wool and linen. Telegraphs could now send messages from the UK to India in hours. You could arrive to a destination in a few hours via train. With this new advancement and advantage, the UK changed their strategy, becoming a hegemonic naval powerhouse, while subsidizing and delegating specific regions for private trading companies to monopolize off of. For example, the Muscovy Company was in charge of trading with Russia. The East India Company took over the Indian Ocean, and the Hudson Bay Company was in charge of Canada. Granted, much of their economic activity was also riddled with labor from enslaved African peoples, even though it was never recognized in British law. Most of the about 2.5 million people were transported to the Caribbean, the second most popular destination after Brazil, to work on mostly sugar plantations between the 17th and 19th centuries. Eventually, slavery was abolished in 1807 with the Slave Trade Act. However, in practice, it still went on for over 2 more decades until the slave abolition.
I read this history book once, and the first ever slaves in America were Dutch slaves in New York. The Dutch arrived in New Amsterdam and they had slaves. And the history book talked about that by then, already, the Dutch were kind of starting to rule out slavery. They gave the slaves a lot of fucking privileges and stuff. I read this once. The Dutch were actually very keen to be much better on slavery than the UK was.
Act was passed in 1833. Of course, this was a dark moment of history for the UK. Eventually, those sugar plantation islands would gain independence and form new nations like Jamaica, Barbados, and most of the Lesser Antilles Islands. Overall, you can see how the story of industrialization mixed with naval trade were key factors. And speaking of naval activity, you can occasionally find things like gray seals and basking sharks in the waters around the UK. And to talk more about the wildlife, here's Gary Harlow. He's a lot like Caleb.
I'm back! You can't get rid of me.
You know that feeling, guys, when you like read the book once and you have information and then there's like conversation with like people and you're like, well, guys, I read the book once. Listen, I know everything. But actually you forgot all the stuff you read and you're like just really stupid on the stuff. Like you knew it once, but you don't. That's me like all the time.
And my amazingly accurate Aussie
I feel like you guys all that like
so
that too.
First, let's focus on Great Britain. Today there are 14 national parks, 9 in England, 3 in Wales, and 2 in Scotland. There aren't many large mammals found on the island. Today, the largest native mammal is the red deer. Most of the predators like wolves and bears were hunted to extinction centuries ago. Those bearskin caps worn by the Queen's Guard were actually made from Canadian black bear pelts. As a temperate climate zone, reptiles are not very common. Only 3 native species of lizard exist, and all snakes except the European adder are non-venomous. The national animals of the UK all make no sense. For England, it's the lion, which is not even native to the European continent, let alone the UK. Whereas for Scotland, it's the unicorn, and Wales is the Welsh dragon, which haven't been discovered yet, but I'm on it. Most people will say that the English bulldog is a very...
I always imagine, I'm a big imaginer, I'm a big fantasizer. Could you imagine an ancient human in the year, let's say in Roman times? You walk around and you go wash yourself at a river, and in the river, you find a fossilized skeleton of a fucking dinosaur.
Very iconic animal that epitomizes the British spirit. Otherwise, if we are discussing the overseas territories abroad, wide range that includes things like flamingos and iguanas in Turks and Caicos, to elephant seals and macaroni penguins of the South Georgia and South Sandwich Islands, as they are very popular breeding
Every time they say Sandwich Island, I get really hungry.
I guess that's it.
I wonder how women look back in Roman days. I think what you have to always imagine about people from the past is there has been no toilet paper and really baths really up until the 1900s. Meaning that most of history, people were smelly fucks.
Well, as you can see, the ocean has played a huge role in the UK story, whether it be the naval trading routes or the fishing industry. To talk more about the food of the UK, is one of our British jogger peeps.
Here we go. British food is actually really good. I remember in Edinburgh, we went to a random pub. There was a bunch of locals just watching football, and I went in there and I'm like, hello, mate. 1 mac and cheese and 1 fish and chips. It was so good.
Britain tends to have a reputation, particularly...
Oh, very insecure. He told Noah that he wants to get his muscles.
among the rest of
Also, dude, tomato beans are so good.
for having dull, bland, flavorless
I sometimes feel like genetically I'm very British, man. I feel so much more British than I feel German.
food. But you know what? I would say that's not the
my
case.
country, bro.
Nah, it's just we enjoy more cozy food and we do have flavor. For one, the most popular dish in Britain by some distance is a curry. Most notably is
I
the
didn't know
chicken
that.
tikka masala, which
That's the thing about the UK. They have so much influence from all the world, like India and stuff like that. They have this really sick food culture, man.
wasn't even invented in India. Claimed to be invented by a Pakistani in Glasgow. The dish we're most
Oh,
particularly
it's like where the kebab, the doner was made in Berlin, yeah.
proud of has to be the full English. You know, your bread.
That's full English is so good. Dude, in Britain they do this thing I want to copy. They grill their tomatoes in a weird way. It's so good. Sure, it looks weird, but normally it looks a bit better. Normally this looks a bit better than that. That looks actually weird, but it's so good.
Bacon, sausage, black pudding, shredded tomatoes, and mushrooms. Otherwise, some of the top dishes you might encounter on a visit to the UK are things like Yorkshire pudding, bangers and mash, Marmite. But if you do put it on toast, you've got to put it lightly. You can't overdo it. Lancashire hot pot, toad in the hole, Welsh rarebit, Cornish pasties, Scotch egg, beef Wellington, shepherd's pie, steak and kidney pie, pie and mash with jellied eels, which is a East London Cockney delicacy. We love our meat pies. And of course, you cannot visit the UK without having our most famous dish, fish and chip.
That's
Whitby
good, though.
is known for
But it depends. Fish and chips can be made very boring and it can be made good. It really depends. Even though I love Asian food, I feel like people see that as the best food and ignore other foods like Britain.
having some of the best fish and chips in the country. For dessert, you might want to try something like a Eton mess, Bakewell tart, sticky toffee pudding, trifle, and so much more. I hope you guys come and have a bite. See you in the UK. Look out for a Rob. Peters.
We just had a whole section about British food and
Come
we
here,
didn't
stream,
mention
fuck you.
crumpets.
Oh.
Gotta have. I'll get you a crumpet. Hang on.
Crumpet?
Okay. This is a crumpet. Is that butter? I like butter. I approve.
Demographic.
He looks so like, I don't know, this entire video he seems so uninterested. Maybe he's just tired. British people. I think Britain is very fucking diverse compared to like Germany. One thing I felt about British people is they're much nicer than Germans. Much nicer. Much nicer. 100%.
Question is, what does it mean to be British? Simply beans on toast.
A British person
Beans on toast are good. Beans on toast are good, man.
is a Greggs sausage roll.
Knowing the difference between a cheeky Nando's and spoons.
Welcome to Wales. Hey! We actually are a country. We have a language.
Look how beautiful that is. Wow. Every time I think about British people and what Britain means to me, I think about this clip. I don't know how to film. I filmed everything wrong, chat, by the way. I filmed this very wrong. This clip right here explains to me British people.
Man, very, very impressive to an old peasant like me. And Lisa.
So it was a Friday night, and me and Lisa were just walking around London. We're just walking around. And if you've ever been to London and walked the walk on the Thames, right? You know what this is. So there's a karaoke theater every day. And all the Londoners just come here and sing together. For a German, that was so weird to me. That will never work in Germany. There's just a stage with karaoke. People sing and everybody sings along, man. And that to me is the major difference between Germans and Brits. In Germany, if you do this, you're gonna go punched in the face, bro. Thank you, Thomas the Train. People just singing and stuff, and everybody was so nice to each other. Even Lisa sing. Yeah, they just sing along. And never gonna happen in Germany, man. That's I don't know. That always explains Britain to me in a way. I don't know, or maybe London at least. I think I've never seen a more British-looking guy, man. Holy crap! It's like Harry and Ron had a child.
For me, a Scottish person is someone who has broad, thick accent that is barely recognisable.
Iron Brew, The Proclaimers, Still Game, Haggis. This is our Wee Hill and Glen.
For English breakfast on a Saturday morning, and irony.
You should have a Sunday roast in a pub on Sunday.
Someone of any background.
Interesting though, I never seen. I'm so German. They would call the police in Germany? Yeah. Dude, I'm the most German guy RL. You will never ever see me dance and sing. Never. You guys are probably the same.
Say what they want.
Bloody brilliant at queuing.
We could be passively, aggressively polite.
Someone who loves to complain about the weather.
You complain about the weather, complain about the football, even when they win.
My thing I think that relates all British people is the fact that we created all these sports and yet we're so bad at all of them.
The benches for the year 6, biff and chip.
Someone from the UK is very self-deprecating. We love to take the piss.
Kind of like licorice all sorts. Everyone is mixed up with different things, but it's kind of like a big family that kind of argues with each other.
So what is a person from the UK? Well, I mean, that question already in itself kind of has a little bit of a
You never leave your comfort zone? Exactly.
Sometimes it's hard to even give a demonym for the people living here. And for many of the people, and depending on the area, the title British might not even be considered applicable.
Yeah, Scottish and Welsh people will typically tell you that they are Scottish and Welsh first. People on the Isle of Man are Manx, and all those penguins in South Georgia are... But for what it's worth, there's so much that goes into the concept of identity when you break down the typical...
So a video of a guy playing the piano and the violin in the supermarket in Germany and he got kicked out. That's Germany, yeah. The best thing about London is you can see any band over there. There are 0 bands that don't for England.
Person that comes from the UK, it's not an easy...
London is sick, but it's so expensive.
What we can attempt to break down is the ethnic makeup of the country in the demographics graph. Henceforth, let's do it.
For one,
I wonder, man.
The UK has just over 68 million people, and as of 2023,
almost 69. You guys are so close to legendary status.
Population in Europe, just surpassing France. When it comes to ethnic makeup, it's a little complicated to come by, but according to the most recent data from the Office of National Statistics, it is reported that the largest group are the white British peoples. At
87. I wouldn't have thought. I would have said 60 or something. But yeah. The problem is we as internet people, we only see capitals. We see London, right, and the diversity there. But normal British cities are probably white as fuck.
87% of the country.
The
this
white
category is pretty broad, however,
the
office designates white into subgroups of white British, which includes Scottish and Welsh, Irish, Irish traveller, and whites of other nationalities. The remaining 13-ish% are made up of other non-white ethnic backgrounds, the largest being Asian British peoples at somewhere around 7% of the country. The majority come from South Asian countries like India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. British, about 3% are black British, mostly from Caribbean and West African backgrounds, and around 2% identify as ethnically mixed individuals, and around 1% identify with other groups.
The UK uses the Type G plug outlet, and they drive on the left side of the road, and fun fact, it's because of the jousting thing, I believe?
Sort of. So no one really knows why, but one theory is that when medieval jousting happened, you used to hold the sword in your right hand, so it made sense to pass on the left.
The majority of the UK...
It almost makes kind of sense, man. But that was so awkward. And in Britain, I wanted to cross the street, and they come from the other side. That was super awkward. And their money... If you touch it, it's like game money. It's like play money. It feels like it's out of Monopoly set.
UK uses the British pound sterling.
I've never
as
driven
its
on the left
currency,
side. I probably would crash.
Quid.
I couldn't handle that.
Except in certain overseas territories, they may use other regional currencies. And that brings us to another quirky aspect of the UK, units of measurement.
So the UK was, of course, the birthplace of the famous imperial system. However, over the past few decades, the UK has been begrudgingly transitioning partially to metric.
And the choice of units to use is absolutely insane. For example, speed,
miles per hour,
temperature,
centigrade.
For weight,
if the subject is a person, you can use stone or pounds, but everything else...
Stone. I remember, man, a long time ago, I talked to Feedback Gaming, my good friend. We talked about health and losing weight, and I'm like, how much do you weigh? And he's like, about 24 stone or something. What the fuck, stone? Are we in the stone age? What do you mean stone?
Or distance.
If it's long distance, like on the road, we use miles. Unless if you're running, then it's kilometers. But if measuring a person, use feet and inches. Any other object, though, meters and centimeters.
For volume.
Liters and milliliters, unless it's beer or milk when we use pints, but only cow's milk, not plant milk, in which case they use pints, but pints are a little bigger than American pints.
Rocks.
Yeah, that's a thing.
That's a thing.
Although there's technically no official language, the country's de facto national language is, of course, English, or technically modern English, which is incredibly different from Old English. And during the 16th century, Shakespearean times, an early version of the modern style of English we know today started to evolve.
Thank you, Shakespeare.
And this, of course, brings us to the famous British versus American English scenario.
The spelling subtleties are minor. Brits tend to spell words that are more similar to their Latin and Germanic origins, whereas Americans spell things more phonetically.
Like
otherwise, some words are just completely different, such as apartment,
flat,
fries,
chips,
crisps, truck,
lorry,
gas,
petrol,
cookie,
biscuit,
trash can,
rubbish bin,
yard,
garden,
sidewalk,
pavement,
road
surface,
candy,
sweets,
faucet,
tap,
spigot,
tap,
flashlight,
torch,
oatmeal,
porridge.
But I do admit I like porridge better because it reminds me of fairy tales from childhood.
I know, just try saying the word porridge and not being just a little bit more happy.
Porridge, it's like...
Porridge is a nice word.
Porridge.
Women are so graceful, right? When we eat breakfast, I'm like, oh man, I'm gonna eat a strawberry and then I eat a bread. And Lisa's like, I'm gonna make myself a vegan porridge with biological honey and strawberries from the fields of Narnia. It just sounds cool. It just sounds posh, huh?
Porridge. And don't even get me started on the accents. In fact, it's speculated that the UK has the largest...
Quick little test. If a man eats porridge, he lost 1 man caught, by the way. If you're a man that eats porridge, you're fucked.
Variation of accents in a single language of any country in the world. Somewhere around 40 to 50, I believe.
It is nuts. Like, if you think about just how small our islands are, and yet the accents have remained really resilient. The two cities of Liverpool and Manchester, only 30 miles apart, they sound completely different.
Otherwise, the UK also has regionally recognized native Celtic-based minority languages.
For example, Cornish is spoken in Cornwall by about 4 people, and Scottish Gaelic is spoken in Scotland, and by far the biggest of the surviving Celtic languages is Welsh.
Even Welsh TV channels and shows, radio stations, and almost all road signs are posted in Welsh and English in Wales.
Each of these languages play a vital role to the cultures of their respective communities.
Religion! Now, this is an interesting one because for most of the UK's history, there's always been kind of like a complication when it came to religious affairs and leadership.
After the Church of England renounced papal authority from the Catholic Church in 1534, things got tricky. It was kind of like,
Oh heavens, our dear monarch doneth died. Who shalt beeth next in line?
It's insert name of next to kin. But here's the problem. They're Catholic.
Jolly toddly wonkles, no!
Let's burn things. That seemed to solve problems.
Burn! And that's like how 28% of their domestic wars started.
In any case, the country is technically a Christian country. Actually, it's technically a theocracy where the crown gets its power from God, long story, and a majority of them hold religion to more of a traditional role, mostly reserved for national festivals, traditions, and even schools and politics.
With all that said and done, it's very important to also highlight the immigrant and non-European communities that make up a very notable demographic of the UK as well.
The black community dates back to the 17th century, when attendants and servants were brought over, such as John Blank during the Tudor dynasty, who was paid about 16 pence a day for his trumpeting skills. Most of the enslaved black people were brought to the Caribbean, not Great Britain, so the black British community stayed relatively small and was mostly confined to Liverpool. It wasn't until the mid-20th century when communities from the Caribbean and West Africa started to set up communities over here.
I want to just say real quick, I'm ultra proud of this chat. There was a woman on the stream and no one reacted to that. I'm very proud. I'm actually genuinely a little bit shocked. That is the first.
The UK also has the
That
oldest
is the
Chinese
first.
community
Wow.
in Europe, arriving in the 19th century, followed by other Asian groups like Indians and Arabs.
The schooling system.
Oh, this is a weird one.
Yeah, so you might have got hints of what it's like from the Harry Potter films and books. Uniforms are worn not only to show
Super
school
awkward.
identity, but also to foster a sense of unity and equality.
And you can't...
I actually don't know what my opinion about school uniforms is. I don't know. I will guess I'm against it to push individualism. I
Kids
don't
that
know.
wear bad clothes because it's like they're all wearing
There's
the same
pros
thing.
and cons.
Yeah, nobody can... Well, you can
It's a
still
good
bully
debate
people,
topic.
Also, like,
School uniforms.
if
There's
you
not
don't-
on clothes.
Education
Creates
is a
order.
huge part of our
What
culture.
the-
English, maths, that's right, maths, not maths.
If it's above 25 degrees though, you're fucked.
Maths.
You say maths.
Not mathematics.
And science and even physical education are compulsory subjects for every stage until the GCSE exams, and compulsory education ends at age 18.
Yeah, and you have that college is another thing you guys have, but it's like you're...
Well, right, so
yeah.
the word college is for older children, it's for teenagers who've chosen to study something very specific.
Yes, yeah.
Whereas in America, it's just you call college what we call university.
It's where we get wasted because we're saying we're studying, but we're not. Another unique trait of the
Same
UK's
here.
social atmosphere is the fact that since it is a constitutional
There also is no bullying because all look the same. Yeah, they'd probably still bully. I don't know.
monarchy, much of the country has a deep tie to the traditions related to said monarchy.
The inner core of the royal family today has about 50 or so members that are either descended or married into the House of Windsor. Only about half of them actually carry out royal duties, which usually include diplomatic missions and being the face of the UK.
Whatever you want to make of that. Outside of the royal family, of course, many noblemen were appointed leadership roles over certain areas, and today you can still even find many people
He's
that
in
are
the royal
descended from
gulag.
these lesser-ranked
exiled?
individuals that
Oh.
had ties to the
Really?
monarchs.
Well, you can, but you have to go to the very posh public schools, which, by the way, is what we call what you call private schools.
Right.
You're likely to run into people who say, oh, I'm actually 718th in line to the throne because my third father once removed was the 13th Duke and Duchess of Wyndham. Sometimes you'll find heirs to the throne where you least expect it. For example, did you know that Olympian Zara Phillips is the Queen's granddaughter?
No, I did not know that. But we can learn more about the sports
Sport.
of the UK with art, with the sports part.
Sport part.
The sport
Sports.
part.
There's no sports in England.
Let's get athletic. And the UK is quite the contender. They have nearly 1,000 medals in the Olympics. The UK is the father of many types of sports. Rugby, cricket, yes, even soccer or football. And hey, for all you
Football. Look at the American football. Oh, come on, bro.
Brits that are criticizing us Americans for calling it soccer, we got the word from you. You invented it. It came from the word association football. So it's kind of your fault. Although
What? Association football? Football. It says right there football. What are you talking about?
the concept of playing a game where you kick a ball
Why is he
around
naked?
has been around since the ancient times. The modern version of what we call football was started in the UK in the 19th century using inflated pig
Slate.
bladders. I wonder how they got started with that. They're just like,
I have a weird question. What is the oldest... Yo, what's the oldest football team... The oldest football team known is generally considered to be Sheffield Football Club, also known as Sheffield FC. It was founded in Sheffield, England in 1857. That's fucking tradition. I live next to a football team that was in 1899, not that far away. Sheffield FC is widely recognized as the world's oldest football club and played a pivotal role in the development of football. The oldest football team in Germany considered to be 1. FC Heidenheim. Hey. Huh? They're earlier than England. Okay, the club was founded in Heidenheim in 1846, but the oldest known football team was founded in 1857. ChatGPT.
So
Fake
far,
news already
England has won
received.
one
Fake your
World
brother.
Cup
What's
in
up, man?
1966 against West Germany, and it was in the iconic old Wembley Stadium that has
Thank you
since
so
been
much, man.
torn
Thank you
down
for
due to
51.
infrastructure problems.
I
and
didn't
it
read the
was
second
buried
sentence.
under a huge grass mound. Also, the trophy was stolen, but found by Pickles the dog. True story. Either way, football is such a huge part of the UK's identity, and they could talk about it forever. They even have a subculture of hooligans or the obnoxious
That disgusts. I hate hooligans. I hate them, dude. Hooligans are the biggest losers in the world, man.
football fans that like always get drunk and start fights and beat each other up. It's almost like a whole other sport itself.
That must be the most British fucking picture ever. Stacey, you hit him, Liam. Liam hit him. Oh, can't believe it. Oh my god, man. That is a British picture, man.
And it's equally entertaining to watch, like drunken MMA, right? Yeah. Otherwise, the modern form of rugby.
Rugby's sick. I love
union
rugby. That's
was
a man's
invented
sport,
in
bro.
The town of Rugby.
That's
where
like
it
American
got its
football,
name
but for
from.
men.
However, many will say rugby is actually descended from the Welsh game Cynapin, which is why today some of the best rugby players come from Wales, and it is a huge part of their national identity. Cricket was invented in
I know
South
nothing
England
about cricket. The biggest sports event of all times was a cricket event. I read something. There was a cricket event in India that had the most viewers ever.
1500s, and is one of the most long-winded sports that can last days to finish. Scotland is also a hub of inventing.
Name a famous Scottish sports person.
sport.
I don't know
the
these
modern
people.
version of golf was also started in Scotland in the
Oh.
16th century and water polo in the 19th century. Scotland is also most noted for their Highland Games, where a bunch of people in kilts compete in a series of strength-based events like the caber toss, Scottish hammer throw, and the weight over bar
Better
toss.
being a
Oh, by
streamer?
the
Oh,
way,
you think
I
so?
did a DNA test, came back 48% Scottish.
Thought you were Polish.
Yeah, so a lot less Polish than what I thought.
What? I mean, it makes sense though.
They'll take me in.
It makes sense, the gingery.
The ginge. I'm Scottish. I should have known. In Northern Ireland, it's not uncommon to see Gaelic football and hurling being played.
Gaelic football is
Native to the
so
island.
hella cringe. I feel like if you do Gaelic football, you're too dumb for real football. Like, you go to a football team, and the trainer's like, I'm sorry, son. You don't have what it takes. Well, then I'm going to play Gaelic football now.
The UK is
It's
also
like
known
the
for
NBA,
their
man.
weird and wacky sports and competitions people loving taking part in, such as the Cooper Hill cheese rolling race.
That got me late so much. I told you many times, this was my opener on Tinder for many years. This got me late so often. True fucking story, man.
Thing. Tar barrel racing, toe wrestling.
Wait, what? Wait,
The Cooper Hill cheese rolling
Wait,
race.
wait.
Tar barrel racing, toe wrestling.
Wait, that is disgusting, by the way. You guys should really come to TwitchCon so we can toe wrestle each other, man. Let's go.
Wrestling,
What the
shin
fuck?
kicking. Let's do that one.
We'll do it after this.
Pancake racing, the stinging nettle eating contest. Yeah, I used to get stung by those things all the time when I was a kid. Like, I cannot imagine eating those things. Gravy wrestling. These are weird. They even have a gurning contest, which is where, like, in order to win, you have to make, like, the ugliest face possible.
That
Like
could
this.
only be a British contest, man.
In any case, that's all I got for you. Cheers.
What's the ugliest face you can do? Can I use my hands? I can't use their hands, right? Chat, everybody make a picture of yourself of your ugliest face without using your hands and send it to me in Discord. Okay, man, I look good lately. The ugliest face I can make. I don't know, wait. Wait. I don't know how to make an ugly face. I'm so beautiful. Bro, they're very talented. I couldn't do that.
Earning contest, which is where, like, in order to win, you have to make, like, the ugliest face
Pretty good.
possible. Like
Respect.
this. In any case, that's all I got for you. Cheerio, toodle pop,
To make
jolly
faces to the
good,
baby? No.
crumbly wrinkles, old
The baby
chap
needs to
and
respect me.
and whatever. I'm gonna
I had
get
a great day with the baby. I didn't stream so much today. I was just chilling with the baby all day because Lisa was busy. And today was such a bonding day with the baby, man. I love being a dad. But I was alone with the baby and I was playing with him all day. Like, we're just on this big mat and we just play. And the cool thing about the baby is he's more and more becoming a human. He more and more, like, wakes up. Like, a baby has, like, an awakening. They wake up. And I did this thing today where I put my head to the baby and he put his head to me. And we're, like, cuddling and he's wrestling me and stuff. It's the cutest shit in the world, man.
this ginger's gonna skedaddle out of here. Toodaloo.
Thank you, Art. Jay, what are some just of the biggest, most notable traditions you've experienced living here?
The day after Christmas, we call it Boxing Day, the 26th of December. It's an extension.
So awkward. In Germany, Christmas is the 24th of December. On the evening, on 24th, you get your gifts, and then the 25th and 26th is visiting all the family.
Of the holiday.
The German way
so
is
you
the
get
best
yet
way.
another day off work, and there's also
Actually, maybe the British way is better. The kids have to go to sleep, and then in the morning they get their presents.
I thought that was a day where you box each other because you're fighting over cheap prices at the grocery stores.
Actually, fun fact, the reason it's called Boxing Day is
Barb's was kind of right. Originally it was supposed to be about giving gifts to the poor, but now it's about getting half-off deals at the mall.
Yeah, Boxing Day. Okay, well, good way to transition into the...
At the Germany, man, Christmas, everything's closed. Like, you can't get anything. If you want any water, you have to go to a gas station.
culture of the UK, and with that, let's bring it to
Imagine
our
having Christmas.
homegirl.
I love Christmas. I'm the biggest Christmas geek in the world. I love Christmas to death. I'm an old school American movie Christmas dad. I love Christmas to
Hannah
death.
with the culture segment.
Culture?
Hey guys,
Britain?
I'm back. Well, actually now, we're back.
Oh, chat, I'm sorry.
Hannah did a thing.
And Ian, he was there too. Okay, this is gonna be a heavy one because
was
with
there
the
too.
UK, it's almost like you're getting an economy-sized multi-package deal of culture and tradition. For one, you must distinguish between whether someone is from England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, the overseas territories, or Crown dependencies. To break it down a little easier, you have the Celtic areas, and then you have the Anglo-Saxon side. So let's start with a quick overview of Scotland. Cultural rule number 1, do not attempt the accent. Even if you think you're good at it, just don't.
I'm Scottish. Oh, come from the Highlands. Yeah. I can do very good Irish.
Scotland was divided by clans, each with their own territory. Each clan even had their own plaid tartan design. And Scottish
Which
their
design
own...
will you choose? I like McFarlane. Seth MacFarlane. McFarlane. It's black and white, you know.
Each clan even...
I do a great Irish accent. Do not talk shit about your brother. Yeah, the Americans have a lot of English names, right?
Even had their own plaid tartan design.
Kennedys were Irish?
Scottish last names often have a Mac before
Which means descendant. She said it already.
Some
I know that from Crusader Kings, guys.
very notable cultural aspects you will probably encounter at some point include ceilidh dances, bagpipes. January 25th is a huge deal where they celebrate Burns Night. New Year's Eve is called Hogmanay, fireball swinging, and
I love Scotland. I could generally imagine living there, man.
the
Straight
first
up.
person to enter the household is considered the bringer of good luck. And the iconic New Year's song.
What's Old Long Saying? Na 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 na. Ah, yeah, yeah. Na,
Old Lang Syne. You know that song.
Wait.
Old Lang Syne.
That was
You
I
knew
did,
that's
right?
what they were saying.
Yeah.
I was just making words up. Also, everyone in Scotland will tell you to try
They fry Mars. They fry Mars bars.
a deep-fried Mars bar. And now, Wales.
I like how this guy travels through all of England for a month and makes a 40-minute video out of it, man. This guy is living the life.
Wales is a unique and very underrated place. It is the land
What do I know about Wales? Gareth Bale.
of song, poetry,
all
but
I
at
know
the same time,
about
hardcore
Wales.
rugby, shin-kicking dragons, and powerful castles. In Wales, the daffodil is a symbol used for women and the leek used for men. Typical emblems of the daffodil or leek are worn on St. David's
The
Day.
sheep
where
shaggers?
people
Isn't
clean
everyone a
their
sheep
rooms
shagger
and are
up
nice
there?
to one another. Are they not nice other days?
I thought the Shetlands are sheep shaggers.
You get
New
one
Zealand
day a
people.
year to be nice. And speaking of which, love spoons. In Wales, traditionally, a man would carve a spoon and give
That
it
was
to
like an
the
anal
woman
plug.
he loved. They have the Molly Lloyd celebration, where they put a horse's skull on a
That's
pole.
fucking
The Don's
metal.
Gumrye. The Ested Fod is a huge deal. Every Welsh person will bring up Tom Jones.
Okay, I did not know Tom Jones is Welsh. I did not know that. Sags bone, sags bone.
Oh.
You're my sad. That's the Carlton man. Alfonso
Moving
Ribeiro.
on to Northern Ireland. This is a complicated one because
here we
it's
go.
kind
Here
of
we
like if the UK and Ireland had a confusing baby that had an identity crisis. Avoiding all the complicated politics that go into this one. This area
Don't avoid that. Tell the people. It should be one.
obviously has
Come out. Sorry, I love that song.
a more Irish Celtic influence and has a mix of Protestant Catholic peoples. This is the only
You ever
place
say
that
both
allows
actors
people to
Welsh? What's up,
freely
Benz?
choose to
I miss
have
World of
either
Warcraft. I have no
one or
time.
both citizenship of either the UK or Ireland. Keep in mind, this is not the official flag of Northern Ireland. Just watch the show Dairy Girls. It does a great job at covering the general idea of what Northern Ireland was like, especially at the end of the conflict era. England! It
Interesting,
is in
actually.
itself super complicated and culturally diverse. It is home to the monarchy. Certain individuals can be knighted for their accomplishments. It is only a recognition,
What? Yeah, what do you get about knighting? You get nothing, right?
not an inclusion into royalty.
Being a knight doesn't mean
Generally
shit.
speaking, English regional cultures are mostly Anglo-Saxon based and concentrated in 6 areas. Speaking of which, England has the widest range of classical architecture. You can find people living in Tudor-style half-timber thatched roofed
cool.
homes next to Victorian, next to
Damn.
Georgian, next to Art Deco, all
You
in
get
the
the
same
title.
block. Also, the
It's
UK loves to give regional nicknames to people. Liverpool people, Scouse, Birmingham
Scousers.
are Broomies, Manchester
Birmingham is the by order of the Peaky fucking blinders.
is Mank, Newcastle
Mank?
is Geordie,
Geordies.
Sunderland is Mackin, Devon and Plymouth folk are Janners,
Janner?
East Londoners are Cockney, and they speak in a weird codified language. Much of
I love Cockney accent, man.
what might be considered English culture was spurred off by the English Renaissance. The era created some of the most renowned authors and playwrights, most notable, the man himself, William Shakespeare.
Isn't there a controversy or a theory that Shakespeare stole a lot? I know nothing about that, though. I have no idea
As
about
a
this
nation,
guy.
the UK was the home of many inventions
Thank
and
you, Silver, my
discoveries.
brother. Thank
Way too many people to mention. We'll just
Yeah.
pop up a list here. Cinema has always been a huge part of UK culture and has been contributing to the world since 1888, when the first motion picture in the world was
wow.
shot in Leeds by Louis Le Prince.
Wow.
Hey, Louis Le Prince was not British, he was French.
I know, I'm just saying he made his motion picture in the UK.
D'accord. Tu peux continuer maintenant.
Anywho, the fact that the American version of The Office was inspired by the UK version of The
The Office. Probably the funniest TV show I've ever seen. Easily. I think you should all watch. If you haven't seen The Office, man, what are you doing? The Office is probably the best TV show ever in comedy. And I tried to watch the English one, Ricky Gervais. I couldn't. It was such a different humor. I guess since I'm a German, I'm very indoctrinated by American humor. I can't watch the UK one.
Cheeseburgers, 3 large fries, 1 special salad and 3 Diet Cokes. And would you like a dessert with that? You get a free dessert because you.
Hey, she's from The Office. I heard that. She's the girl from The Office.
Come back and I'll treat you nice. I won't bite. I'll do it nice and slow for ya.
That is Cockney accent, bro. Right there.
Like, well-renowned television shows is amazing. I mean, it's one of my favorite TV shows of all time.
Yeah, The Office has a very religious following, man. It is, and I never got that. I never watched The Office. I watched it last year. I saw The Office, and it is it's the best comedy show of all times. I mean, Scrubs. I don't really see Scrubs and Malcolm in the Middle as super comedy. They also have like life lessons. But The Office is just unbelievable. But the problem with The Office is when Steve Carell leaves, it's over, right?
In any case, the territories and crown dependencies all have their own unique traits as well. Jersey and Guernsey and the Isle of Man each have their own languages and confusing political systems. In Gibraltar,
I need to ban some people. Man, dude.
people speak Yanito. The Pitcairn Islands has a Polynesian Creole called Pitcairn. Turks and Caicos has a Caribbean House Evolution boat party. And the Cayman Islands have an entire week dedicated to
Pirate
pirates.
Week, man.
Well, that was...
The problem for gingers is I love Caribbean stuff, like how beautiful it is, but I'm a ginger.
And of course, one huge facet of UK culture is their music. And with that, Keith is on tour. Can't leave his dream job to...
British music. British have very good musicals and opera and stuff. Like they're ranked 2 next to the USA and Italy, and they're ranked 3. I always felt like, as a German, I always felt like when it comes to entertainment, the world of entertainment, TV shows, movies, music, etc., the USA is by far ranked 1. No one can deny that. The US has the best entertainment in the world. And then the UK, right? And then there's long nothing, I feel like. The Germans are super far behind, man. I always felt Britain and the USA are the kings of entertainment, man. I always care about meta and science. Why, for example, is the US so much better at entertainment than all the others? I think that's such an interesting question.
British musician. Guys, say hi to David.
Must be a historical culture.
And we got David here. Explain who you are. Introduce yourself.
I'm a music nerd from the UK. And
that's a lot of subs, man. Damn.
Piano. Britain has always had a rich musical culture. We had the Elizabethan lute music of John Dowland, the grand Baroque music of Handel.
Handel is a German. My home city, Halle, is only known for one thing. He was born there. Lisa's apartment was next to his birth house where he was born. But I always talk shit about my home city, Halle, because if you study this guy, he was born in Halle, but he hated it. He felt it was a peasant, rubble, shit village, so he went to London, right? And the thing with Halle is that they're so proud of, oh, Handel was born here. Oh my God, we have Handel. Yeah, he didn't even care about you fucks.
And at the start of the 20th century, we had 2 of Britain's most influential composers, Gustav Holst and Edward Elgar. But it wasn't really until the 1960s
the
that
Beatles
British
are probably the
became
biggest
the
thing
global cultural export that it is today. Of course, I'm talking about the British invasion, where bands such as the Rolling Stones, the Kinks, the Animals, and of course the Beatles took the world by storm. And then since that invasion, the UK has continued to contribute to global popular music. Many genres of music can trace their origins back to the UK.
John Pino was a bit later than this. This is like the 60s right now, I think.
In the early 70s by the likes of Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, and
how did Ozzy Osbourne look in Black Sabbath? One sec.
Pioneered in the early 70s by the likes.
Is that Ozzy Osbourne right here?
And many of prog rock's most iconic bands hail from the UK, including Pink Floyd, Yes, and Genesis. The most famous Welsh musician is probably Sir Tom Jones. Northern Ireland has Van Morrison, and Scotland's most successful musician,
Calvin Harris.
Britain has always had a strong history of folk music as well, particularly in Scotland, where Gaelic language music is still very popular, with artists like Julie Fowlis continuing the tradition today. Queen, David Bowie, George Michael, Kate Bush.
I love George Michael. I'm a huge George Michael fan.
Oasis, Elton John, Radiohead, Muse, Coldplay.
Yeah, Radiohead, Muse, that's Coldplay. I once asked you, Chat, what's the biggest normie music in the world? And you guys all said Coldplay. Radiohead, though. I can't... Did Radiohead the Creep, right? Because I'm a creep. Yeah, they did that.
Coldplay, the Spice Girls, Ed Sheeran, Adele,
Ed Sheeran, Adele.
Since that British invasion in the 1960s, the UK has not stopped churning out.
UK is very successful with musicians, man.
Play a major part in popular music.
It must be because they speak English naturally. Like, imagine you're German and you make really, really good music. It's probably very hard for you to get into the English and US market because it's not your home language.
For decades.
The marketing agencies, the big labels are not there.
Thank you, David. Actually, guys, if you didn't know, Jay is a musician. You make music as well.
Sometimes.
What are some of your biggest inspirations?
Dude, Germans, he looks exactly like the guitar player of Anna Mein Kantereit, right? Right here. This is a German thing, you guys will understand.
You make music as well.
Anna Mein Kantereit. The fucking guitar player.
Sometimes.
What are some of your biggest inspirations in music?
Is it really, really boring and dull and uninteresting if I say that my favourite band is the Beatles? Yeah. Shall we do the friend zone?
Well, they're friends with nobody anymore since they fucking left us.
As you can see, Britain has had a fair few dealings with other countries around the world, which brings us to
the animation, the
motion graphic. Israel?
First of all, as a permanent member of the UN Security Council and founding member of numerous IGOs, such as the G7, NATO, World Trade Organization, and Council of Europe, the UK has lots of international ties. Although the Brexit situation did cut them...
You know, he makes much longer videos nowadays because his content is better. I wish he will redo Germany. I think everyone in chat wishes he would make a big video about their country, right?
Off from EU authority, many of the diplomatic laws and trade deals with the EU are almost exactly the same as they were pre-Brexit, and today the interaction is still there and open. It's just a little different when it comes to certain legislative issues like immigration and
from the
economic
UK?
policy. Empire has gone, its influence is still strongly felt around the world, with lots of other countries speaking English, playing cricket, having similar-ish systems of government, and so on. Many of these countries are members of the Commonwealth of Nations, and the monarch is still, at least in a figurehead sense, the head of state of many of them. The UK still has very close relations to the Commonwealth countries, with many of these people settling in the UK. Most notably, some of the largest diaspora communities from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nigeria, Ghana, and the Caribbean. The UK, or England in particular, had a massive rivalry with France riddled with war for much of their history. For the last century, though, especially after World War II, they've done a complete 180 and have found themselves on the same team.
Fighting a Nazi together, man, that must be bonding.
To poke fun, but in a loving way at each other. Interestingly
call
enough,
that
the country they probably...
Fuck you, French fucks. You don't even speak any languages, man. I talked to my French housekeeper woman. No, not housekeeper woman. We're renting a house from a woman, and she doesn't speak English, man. Nobody speaks English in fucking Paris, bro. I will write too.
Before the Good Friday
what is this? I need to learn English.
Today, however, you can't deny that the citizens of both countries enjoy an extremely close relationship. Many British people have Irish heritage, they intermarry quite a bit, and many have dual citizenship. Australia and Spain have the largest communities of British national...
Isn't Australia the state that was once a prison colony, meaning if you were a white Australian, you're probably descendant of prisoners?
Residents living abroad. Australia has always been a hotbed destination for immigration for Brits seeking the warmer climate, and specifically for Spain,
kinda, right?
Ibiza is almost like a little Britain, as so...
Yeah, Ibiza and Mallorca is never ever go there,
many
man.
British people either go there on holiday or to move. In terms of their best friends, however, many in the UK would probably say the USA, and maybe some might include Canada. The biggest differences between the two is that the USA gained full independence through revolution, whereas Canada just kind of stayed British until they slowly over time requested to be given more and more autonomy until technically 1982 when they adopted their own constitution, but still remained under the Commonwealth. It wasn't even long after the Revolutionary War that the UK and USA quickly patched things up, having a shared language, and today a population with about 11% of its people ethnically descended from British roots has not only further helped them communicate and relate culturally, but eventually they've joined in almost all major international conflicts since the mid-19th century. Today they swap each other's films, TV shows,
having
music,
friends
and so on.
politically is
Europe,
pretty fucking strong. We see that in
USA
roleplay games.
related will typically have some kind of connection to the UK, as they kind of act as like the link between North America and Europe. Overall, the USA and UK may have started sour, but today they have never been close.
5 messages in his whole life, and he's like, what is this streamer? Don't like Brits, Ireland #1.
In conclusion, sorry about the Empire, but basically Britain is now finding its role as a modern, progressive country that hopes to leave a good mark on the world. This flag actually makes me realise that when Brits go abroad, even though we like to claim that we're not very patriotic, you know, we go abroad and it turns out, yes, we really are. And we really care and we really do love our country. And they hate when people fly their flag upside down!
What are you still doing here, mate? Jeez! Well, if you want to see more, click these videos. Have fun. Looking good, boy.